Though Genghis Khan was called the Khan of the Burned Earth, the nomadic warriors, ruthlessly exterminating men and old men, young girls and women, as a rule, were not killed, but were taken away with them. By the way, if warriors surrendered, they were accepted for service rather than killed. Genghis Khan acted as the laws of Yassi prescribed, so in spite of the cruelty, a mandatory trait of the time, Genghis Khan was still quite a fair and authoritative ruler. To serve in his army, even former enemies were honored. The people of the steppe spoke of Genghis Khan as, "Master Temujin will take off his dress and give it to you. He will get off his horse and offer it to you. Here is someone who truly knows how to rule a society, feed his soldiers, and keep his house in order." Contrary to prevailing opinion, there was a certain degree of matriarchy in Genghis Khan's empire. And according to some historians, there was a considerable number of women in the army of the Mongols itself. And it was not only the concubines, but also the fully equipped warriors. European women, notable for their whiteness of face and unfamiliar beauty to the Mongols, were always valued. The captive beautiful women, therefore, had every chance to live, though not in love and harmony, but at least without any humiliation or mockery. For instance, after the fall of Gorganj, the capital of the Khanate of Khwarezm, protector of peace and faith, Great Turkan, mistress of women of both worlds, Shaheen of Khwarezm, Turkan Khatun, and her relatives were taken captive. The children of members of the ruling dynasty were killed immediately, and the women of the harem were given as wives to Genghis Khan's entourage. The subsequent fate of the former Shaheen and the Lady of Women was rather tragic. She, among other noblemen of Khwarezm, was sent with a caravan of captives to the capital of Mongolia, Karakorum. There they were to serve at the court of the Great Khan. The concubines. As a common practice, noble Mongol warriors took captive women for their harems. First of all, it was considered an indicator of status, and secondly, especially European women, as already mentioned, were highly valued by the Mongols. And thirdly, the Mongols believed that captured women were the first and main indicator of victory over the enemy, showing that the winner was far superior to the defeated. The Mongols believed that one who was unable to protect his women was not worthy of the right to live, despite the fact that the obligation of a concubine was to unconditionally obey the lord. Many captives still managed to achieve a high position in the new family. One of the most famous captives, though not European, is thought to be Dorjin, the wife of Genghis Khan Ugadai, Genghis Khan's third son, who ruled from 1246 to 1248. The woman had succeeded in becoming a leader and ruled Mongolia for 4 whole years after her husband's death. The unfortunate victims. Of course, there is no denying that many female captives died long before they entered the harem and obtained the so-called status of concubine. After the capture of villages and towns, many were violently raped by common soldiers and then murdered, and many ended their own lives after that. It was also very common for the leaders themselves to give the young woman to the warriors, just for them to have fun, as a prize for valor shown in battle. Unfortunately, this attitude was widespread to all women, and European-looking girls were considered a very expensive and worthy gift for a brave warrior. Considering that the fate of the warrior himself in the future was unclear and the likelihood of dying was also very high, he took advantage of the moment and what was available at the present moment. Obviously, sometimes the ill-fated survived and even dragged along with the caravan for a while, but as a general rule, women who survived the amusements of the nomads were of no use to anyone. They might be not even fed or simply tired, left in the steppe to die. But despite such cases, a significant portion of Mongols were still trying not to dishonor women, and much less wanted to kill them. For a regular warrior, it was a good idea to give or sell a beautiful captive to his commander. And since the Mongols were quite practical people, they did not simply destroy anything that could either improve their financial situation or enhance their own status. In this regard, fate of the captives who fell into the harem of Genghis Khan himself is rather indicative. The next chapter will be about Khan's concubines. Genghis Khan had 4 official wives, and by some sources, more than 7,000 concubines. It is not so much that the great Khan had incredible abilities in terms of acts of sexual pleasures. The captured women, and we will repeat, European women, served as an attribute and an extra proof of Genghis Khan's power. After each of the raids, the most beautiful women and girls were often presented to the Khan so that he could decide whether to give them to his loyal warlords or send them to his harem as the next jewel in his collection. And despite the powerlessness of women in the harem, they were not being tortured or harassed. These women were well fed, allowed to look after themselves, taught to play instruments or some other necessary skills if required. They also always used the skills of the captives, which could also be beneficial. Now, let's take a look at what the Chinese general Meng Hun wrote. When our messenger, who was sent to the north, presented himself to their Tsar, at the end of the welcoming ceremony, he was commanded to sit down to drink wine with his wife, Princess Laimang, and 8 concubines, who were called ladies, at every meal, and afterwards they were also present. These concubines were of blinding whiteness and beautiful appearance. That said, those women who were notable for something in the harem of the great Khan, either beauty or skills, then they were treated differently. It is difficult to imagine that even in our modern days, women were called ladies. But as we can see, it was a requirement back in the day, at the time of the rule of the famous Khan, Genghis Khan. The whole orchestra was composed of 20 captive young ladies who could play musical instruments and accompanied Genghis Khan on all his campaigns. The great conqueror, strange at first glance, loved and appreciated music very much. It is noteworthy that the wives of defeated lords of other states often became the Khan's concubines. A legend tells that one of his closest associates was told this way by the Khan himself about the highest pleasure out of all for a man. A man's supreme joy consists in defeating his enemies, chasing them before him, taking from them what they possessed, seeing the faces that were dear to them in tears, riding their horses, grasping their daughters and wives in his arms. Some concubines were given by the Khan for merit to his servants, but in any case, for any female prisoner to get into the harem of Genghis Khan or simply a high ruler was probably the best solution. It is known of a case when the Khan gave away one of his concubines after a prophetic dream. It is quite interesting that even when giving away his wife, the Khan explained the reasons of his deed. This demonstrates once again that in Genghis Khan's time, women were treated, even if not always as equal members of society, but at least with the respect they were bound to receive. Genghis Khan gave Ibaga, the captive concubine, to his guard Jurchidai. The great Khan explained to Ibaga the reason for his decision by giving his already ex-wife 100 men. Not that I did not love you for your bad temper or your lack of beauty, nor did I say that you were impure in body when I set you among my spouses. I bestowed thee upon Jurchidai for his heroic services, for he has risked his life in battles, and for his ability to gather the separated nations. Thy father, Jaganbu, gave thee a cook, a Sheikh Timur, with 200 men, now departing from me. Give to me in memory of a Sheikh Timur with 100 men. The sole thing for which a concubine could be executed without pity was unfaithfulness. Whether Khan himself was in a relationship with her or not, Genghis Khan was very jealous of his property. For example, it was known that the Khan was infatuated with Kulan of the Merkit clan. To introduce the beauty to the Khan, his close associate Nai was sent after her. On the way back, Nai, fearing that the warriors might do improper things, kept the young woman at his place for 3 days. Naturally, Genghis Khan was furious and ordered to execute the servant, but Kulan herself spoke up for Nai. Nai told us that he was a nobleman of Khan. Since there were resentful warriors on the way, he left us at his place. If we had not met Nai and he had not left us with him, I do not know what would have happened to us. Do not torture him, but if any Khan's clemency be to me, better examine my innocence. These words illustrate everything that was mentioned above. If the captive was not lucky enough to become a concubine of the Mongol leaders or the Khan himself, in all probability she could become the pastime of the ordinary warriors, who, as a rule, were not ceremonious, and when they were done with her, she was simply killed, or the poor woman would soon die herself. Thank you for watching our video. Subscribe to Flip Side of History for more videos from us and leave a like.